Mr. President,
Mr. Hoagland.
I move that we come out of executive session.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to come out of executive session. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Do I have another motion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Hoagland.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in, I have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 We're adjourned. Mr. Clerk, we ready? Ready. Thank you. Well, welcome to tonight's City Council regular meeting. It is, for the record, at 6:02. Today is Tuesday, May 4th. We'll start off by doing roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilman Morton?
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh?
Here.
Councilwoman Strader?
Here.
Councilman Hoagland?
Here.
Councilman Burnt?
Here.
Absent are Councilwoman Perot and Mayor Simpson.
Next on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Lead me in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is our community invocation by Pastor Vinnie Hanke. Is it Hanke? Perfect. Welcome. Thank you.
City Council members, thanks for the opportunity to come and pray for you and with you tonight. Would you join me in a word of prayer? God, we thank you for the privilege to meet together, to exercise our freedom and leadership in the city that you've given to us to live in. We thank you for Meridian. We thank you for its citizens, for its teachers, for its first responders, and for its leaders. And God, we ask that you might bless them as they serve. We might ask that you might protect their families as they give up time from them as they lead. You might grant them wisdom, discernment, and insight as we consider the future of our great city together. We ask for a spirit of harmony and unity among its citizens, that we might love and serve our neighbors as you have loved and served us through the gospel of Jesus Christ. We ask these things through his name. Amen. God bless you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate you being here. There we go. That's better. All right. Next item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hoagland.
we would like to add one item to our agenda for this evening. It would follow the adoption of the agenda after council approval, and that is we would like to take a moment of remembrance for Lisa Holland. For those that don't know her, she's a Meridian resident and was one of our planning and zoning commissioners who unfortunately and tragically lost her life Sunday afternoon. So I'd like to add that to the agenda. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I would move adoption of the agenda as amended.
Second.
I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended and a second. All those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nay?
Right?
Okay, adoption is amended. All right, we'll start with, if we could just take a couple of seconds and participate however you like, but we'll take a couple of seconds to remember Lisa Holland. Thank you. I'd also like to do a point of privilege at the moment and to allow those on council and myself and to just, if they would like to share some thoughts about excuse me. About Lisa, so I'll turn the time over to council if you wish.
President.
Ms. Strader?
As everyone could see from the outpouring of support in the community and the kind words being said about her, that Lisa was a very special person to many people and a leader for our community and a wonderful friend to many, and a great mom and wife and daughter and sister. And so just want to say my condolences to her family and to everybody affected by this, and that she was a wonderful person and we were blessed to have her with us while she was here.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. President, it is very difficult. Fortunate to know Lisa and her family since they were little kids, and she was just a wonderful person and someone when she had the best interest of a community in mind. And as economic development and for development director for CUNA, she was getting that city on the right path, and just lots of energy and great ideas and collaboration. And as a planning and zoning commissioner for our community, she just was well respected, had great ideas, engaged in a wonderful way with people and ideas. And even if there are different ways to do things, she did it in a way that was enjoyable. And yeah, this is hard. Family's going through a lot. And just remember Dan, her husband, in your prayers. I mean, he lost a wife and a child. So, and starting over in life, and that's very, very hard. So just keep the Bloomquist and Holland family in your prayers, and they need it. It's just a difficult time. They have strong faith, but being humans, it's difficult for this type of thing to handle. So we just we'll continue to move on. I know planning and zoning folks are, distressed, our commissioners, and as well as the department, and it's understandable. I just know that we'll just continue moving forward and remember Lisa and all the good things she's brought to our community, and just be grateful that we had this moment of time in her life that she was part of ours.
Thank you, Brad.
Mr. President.
Mr. Kavanagh.
I always talk way too much, and I'm struggling with my words tonight. I'm sure, like all of us, we were really taken back by the outpouring of support from so many in our community, and not just the Meridian community or the CUNA community, but really the entire valley. And while we like to claim her as ours, she was shared and loved by many. I want to thank you, Brad, because Councilmember Perot and I were texting each other today, and there was something that Jessica said that has sat with me, which is if there's, and not to proselytize, but if there's anything that we can take away to give us a little bit of comfort in this time, that she knew the Lord, and that she will be reunited with her family one day soon. I want to share the Boise Dev, if you haven't read it, put together just a remarkable tribute to her and her service to our community. And he shared her mantra, which has just sat with me. And I'm going to beat up all of it, so I just want to summarize a part of it, which is never stop learning, never stop doing, and never stop giving. And darn it, you meet her, and it's not just something we say, it's not something you put on a bumper sticker, like she lived that. And I think all of us, myself included, are a little better for being able to rub shoulders with her. So again, condolences to her family.
Thanks, Luke.
Mr. President,
Mr. Borton.
there's not much more I can add. We love and miss Lisa. And it's no surprise going through this to see, as Councilman Cavanagh pointed out, the many, many ways she's been engaged in our community, professionally as a friend, and the impact she's had on our valley. One of many great things that she's had an impact on, in Meridian for sure, but elsewhere, and will carry forward for those that she worked with, is the manner in which she did her business and how she treated people. She openly loved and cared when she served. That is an exceptional example of a public servant and how to do it right for the right reasons and very well. We've all taken lessons from how she did her business and conducted herself and served with love and passion. So sorely missed, but we'll be committed going forward to try and serve in that manner. Serve our community, care for our families and our friends in the same manner as she always did. It's a shining example that she provided for all of us, so committed to do so going forward.
Thanks, Joe. I don't have a ton to add. When I was elected to City Council 4 years ago, I was on planning and zoning. And obviously when that happened, I resigned my spot, and the vacancy that was taken was by Lisa. I'm not going to say that I knew her exceptionally well, but I got to know her pretty good, and she was so well-spoken, and she was so genuine. And one of the attributes of a leader that we follow for sure is someone who cares. And she absolutely cared about what she did. She cared about multiple communities. She had roots in Boise, our friends to the east, and she had obvious roots in Star, and she played a big role in what we're doing in Meridian, and she did it because she cared. And it's hard. It's always hard to lose someone, but it's always hard. It's harder when that person is so engaged. Excuse me. In the betterment of community. So when the mayor called me Sunday morning, I was up at her place in Donnelly. I thought he was joking. I was like, what did you just say? And it was hard. But Dan, we love you, buddy. We're praying for you. We're praying for the Holland family and the Bloomquist family. Know that you have friends in the city of Meridian. And know that we're always close. So thank you for the kind words. Thank you for this opportunity to shed some light on a dear friend. Next, anything else?
Thanks for the privilege, Council President. Appreciate your comment.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is public forum. Mr. Clerk, do we have anyone signed up?
Mr. President, we did not.
Okay. On to community presentations, and we have the privilege of having our assessor, our Ada County assessor, Mr. McQuaid here. Sorry you had to follow that, but we're glad that you're here. And I was just telling Joe before we walked in, this is the most fascinating presentation that we get all year because the numbers that you provide to us are always extremely interesting. So, welcome.
Mr. President,
Ms. Rader.
would it be okay just to take maybe 1 or 2 minutes just so council can kind of gather our composure and be ready to listen to the assessors?
Absolutely, great. We'll take a 5-minute break if that's okay. Sorry, thank you. Hey, Liz, can you hear me?
Yep.
Mr. Clerk sent you an email with the attachment that Mr. McQuaid's going to be talking about, just to give you a heads up.
Perfect. Thank you.
All righty. Do we need to do something? We don't need time or anything, do we? Okay. Mr. McQuaid, it's all you. Thank you for allowing us that 5 minutes. I appreciate it.
I did not know Lisa. I not even was familiar with the name, but last night my wife, she said, "Bob, do you know Lisa Holland?" I said, "No, I don't." And she said, "Well, she and her daughter were killed in an accident." And I remember I just got sick because as a husband and as a parent, as a husband, I can't imagine what it'd be like just all of a sudden your life's partner is gone. And the child that you and your wife gave life to is gone and you're just by yourself. And I had to step outside for a minute. It was so emotional for me. So Lisa, even though I didn't know her and she didn't know me, she certainly has affected my life too.
And Bob, I don't mean to interject, but I think that's a very common, you don't have to know someone to feel that, you know? I totally agree with you. I don't need to, we were just talking about it up here, similar things. I totally agree with you. Very nice of you to say that.
Well, it's amazing how many, we don't know how many lives we touch, do we?
Right.
And it's really unfortunate. But, well, Mr. President, council members, I'm going to get started here, and I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes. I don't want to abuse my stay here. I've come out here for is to give you some numbers for for budgeting purposes, and then also just to give some information such as why are the numbers the way they are? How did we get to that? What's driving that? And then also, I want to talk about, to clarify, a topic that really has been widely discussed and is widely misunderstood, and that has to do with tax burden. And that's going to be driving my presentation. I'm not going to spend quite so much time on the numbers. I'm going to quickly, I'll talk to you about what your total market value is, and we'll get to the potential taxable value, and that's on that sheet that I handed out. Then we'll quickly cover just some of the numbers on single-family residential. Then I want to go into why we think the market has been doing what it's been doing, and maybe an idea of what I think might change it, and briefly hit some of the numbers on commercial. And then I want to a little more detail on new construction. That's really important to you because of your budget. It increases budget capacity. And then a little discussion about tax burden. One thing, these things are bound to change. It sounds like the House passed a bill today, I believe it was sent over to the House, changing the homeowner's exemption. And I'm going to get to the potential taxable value, we're going to take out, I'll give you the total market value, and we'll take out homeowner's exemption. Well, that's going to change just because of that piece of legislation. But anyway, we'll get started here. The total market value in the city of Meridian was $21.3 billion. That's up 32% compared to last year. But that's the total market value, not the taxable value. The taxable value, we need to take out the homeowner's exemption. I just mentioned that. That's $3 billion. We know that's going to go up. The piece of legislation looks like it's going to go up from $100,000 to $125,000. Then we have to take out outstanding exemptions. Not all exemptions have been processed. The commissioners have to get those numbers to me by the 15th of this month. So we'll take those out. We'll take last year's values as a proxy for what this year's values would be, and then we will add in the operating property. That's the property that's owned by utilities. The State Tax Commission assesses that operating property. Outstanding exemption is $370 million. Operating property is $104 million, and you have that on that sheet in front of you. All of that gives what we call a potential taxable value, and that's what really a rough idea of what your levy would be based on. Just a quick discussion about residential values. Market value is $16.4 billion. That's up 32% over last year. And median increase for existing is over 26%. And we're just wondering what that's going to be like when the public gets those numbers. What's that going to do to our Board of Equalization hearings? Are people pretty much conditioned to their values have just really gone way up? Or is this going to really be a shock to them? We don't know.
I think it's going to be a shock, Bob.
Do you think so?
I think so.
It's unprecedented. It's unheard of. We've never seen this before. Median value, single-family residential, the county median, the MLS median is 443,000. Ours is just about 400,000. We're a little bit less than the MLS median. I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about why this market has been doing what it's been doing. It's, first of all, our numbers were based upon 13,500 sales last year. That's the most sales we've ever had. We'll usually have around 10,000, 11,000, but 13,500 in a year when the economy was shut down. It's just phenomenal what was going on out there. We had 3,700 new homes last year. The prior year, we had 4,700 homes. So new construction, we were about 1,000 less than we were the year before. That was in 2020. So why? Why are we seeing a 26% median increase? First of all, it's a supply and demand imbalance. A lot of it has to do with the growth of people coming in into the area. There's not the supply is just not there for that. 3% population growth in Ada County, that to me is a staggering number. When you look, and I haven't figured out what it is, but certainly maybe 15 years or so, we would see a doubling of the population. 20 years at the most, we'd see doubling population at a 3% growth. That's really unheard of. Usually it would be about maybe 1.5%, 2%, but a 3% in 1 year. Millennials, they're getting into the market. They're pushing things up. They're finally getting out and they're wanting to have their own house to live in. A lot of homeowners have refinanced and they're just staying put. They're not putting their house on the market. That's really constricting the supply, available supply. And of course, low interest rates has a lot to do with it, but there's more to it than that. A lot of people are paying cash. They're getting into bidding wars. I was talking to someone the other day. We went out for a walk in his neighborhood. There was a house that they had just put a for sale sign up that day. That night, there were a group of people standing around. They were actually bidding on that house right there before the first full day of going on the market. So you've got low interest rates and cash buyers coming in. Of course, we have rising labor costs, material costs. Concrete last year was the issue. This year it's lumber prices. Lumber has gone from $600 per thousand board feet to $1,600 a board foot. Someone that I work with is doing a little construction project. He bought a bundle of 2x4s, 8-foot 2x4s, about like this. And he got to the checkout stand, it was $150. And he said, wait a minute, this can't be right. It's like, yeah, it's $150. So we've got that, and then of course the shortage of new construction. Just mentioned a minute ago, we only had about 4,000 new houses this year compared to last year. 3,700 new homes compared to 47 last year. And to me, I think the only thing that will tend to cool us down a little bit is going to be rising interest rates. That will certainly shut some of it off, but not completely down because people coming in with cash paying for that. So that's.
I don't mean to interject. What do you think those? I mean, where do you see those interest rates going to? Do you think?
Where do I see them going? Yeah. It's really hard to. I can't believe interest rates are as low as they are right now.
You don't have to answer that question if you don't want to. If you feel comfortable doing it, that's fine. But I don't want to put in a spot. Hey, Bob McQuaid was in Meridian. He's.
You might as well ask me when to go wash your car, because if I say do it today, you know it's going to rain in the next 24 hours. So it's just the opposite. So it's the rising mortgage rates, and I think that would be good because that would give us kind of a softer landing. I don't see a crash coming. I really don't. Not when people are paying cash for the properties. It's not like it was in 2006 and 2007 where people who really weren't qualified to be getting mortgages were getting large mortgages. So on the commercial property, $4.8 billion in real property. It's a 32% increase. Median change on Commercial was 11%, that's improved commercial. And we add personal property into that, gives you a total market value. This is not taxable value, but total market value of about $5 billion. It's a 30% increase. Let's talk about new construction. This is an important piece because this is what, at least under the old rules, who knows what it's going to be like before tax bills go out. New construction, you take last year's levy times the new construction value, you can increase your budget by that amount under the existing rules. So the taxable value, and this is taxable new construction, it's $1.1 billion. That's up 28% over last year. Of that, residential is $581 million, and commercial, it's got to be. Oh, okay, yeah. 581 million. Commercial is 270 million. New subject change of status, 289 billion. And that gives you the new construction piece. Urban renewal is 561 million. That's up 40%. So what I would like to just go into for just almost the next few minutes that I've got, I have 5 minutes left, is the tax burden. That is really misunderstood, and everybody's talking about it. And that is who pays property taxes, commercial property or the residential property owners. Here in Meridian, it's 70% of property taxes are paid by residential property owners, 30% by commercial. And that is just exactly what it was last year. So here in Meridian, it really hasn't changed much, but over the years, residential is picking up a larger piece. And it's easy to turn commercial property owners into villains because they aren't paying as much of the property tax burden as they were in the past. We were in the recession. It was just the opposite. Commercial was paying more, residential was paying less because they were hit the hardest by the declining values. But just to put this in perspective, and I think once we understand this, then it all kind of makes sense. We have 45,000 residential parcels. That's 12 times the number of commercial parcels, and it's at $16 billion value, or 16 billion, I don't know if that's, yeah, 16 billion on, 16 billion in residential. That's 3 times the value of the commercial. So we just have a lot more residential property, many, many times the volume of the number of parcels, and then the value is so much more. And another reason the value is increasing so much is we're looking at a 25% increase in residential, an 11% increase in commercial. And I just really we don't see the large increases in commercial because they just could not withstand that. If they had their property values increasing, especially on rental property, if it was increasing at 25%, they would just constantly be raising their rental rates, and they just can't do that. So that tends to put a damper on that. And the last thing I just want to mention about tax burden, again, it's the reason why commercial residential is going so fast is we're seeing a lot more construction, a lot more houses, more houses than commercial properties, and then also the value of residential property is increasing so much faster. That's why to me, I see this 70-30 split as opposed to maybe about 60 when you go back to just before the recession. But I think probably the most important takeaway from this is the fact that there really is no optimal mix. No one says the optimal mix for residential should be 60% commercial 40 or commercial 60, residential 40. There's nothing like that. There's no real optimal mix. This just happens to be the way it is because of the market forces. And one thing I really try to focus on, not so much on the tax burden, but the level of taxation, and that is where are we on our percentage of assessed value to sales prices? On single-family residential, when we have 13,000 sales, it's really easy for us to figure out what the level is, 400,000 or whatever. Residential or commercial is much more difficult for us because we have a lot fewer sales. So what I'm trying to make is that typically when it comes to the level, we assess residential property at about 98% of what the sales price would be. That's as of January 1st. Statistical, that's where we are. Commercial is usually at about 93 or 94. So commercial is actually at a lower level than residential is. Last year, for the first time, both residential and both commercial were at 94%. So to me, that is really the most important number, is that those levels are equal. So with that having been said, Mr. President, members of the council, I'm just going to wrap things up. I have just about 1 minute and 20 seconds for questions.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hoagland.
a question. Bob, thank you for being here. I remember my first time on council, it was the middle of that recession and a whole different presentation and numbers here.
Yes, it really is, isn't it?
Big difference. But residential parcel count, you're showing in 2021 a 45.5. And I read somewhere last day or two an article that talked about Ada County, Treasure Valley, 1 in 5 of the homes are purchased as not primary homes. And so from a homeowner's exemption standpoint, where are we in terms of those 45,000 qualify for homeowner's exemption versus, and then I think I would summarize then saying, well, then the rest are rentals or some, investment properties, those types of things. So do you have a number that?
Mr. President, Councilman Hoagland, no, I don't have the answer to that. I'm sorry.
It just, Mr. President and Bob, we hear a lot of people talk about, oh, it's a rental, and we know some things are, and we even have subdivisions now. Investors are going in to build a whole subdivision as rental because people can't afford the down payment on a home, but they want a single-family home, so they're willing to rent. And so it's just dealing with the marketplace and how people deal with it. So, yeah, it's just an interesting number, how many are primary owners versus secondary owners, and does that do something to a community? Does it change the makeup, those types of things? I don't know.
Mr. President, Councilman, I could probably get that information for you if you wanted to know of the single-family residences, what the proportion of the occupied versus the non-occupied are, if that would help.
That'd be great, yeah. Just another fact to have that we can speculate about.
Mr. President.
Ms. Strader.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'll go on what is normally the Brad Hoagland soapbox. I'll try not to dwell on our federal management of our country's finances, but CPI is not the whole picture, and this is inflation at work, in my opinion, and financial repression. And we're just seeing how this is starting to affect people in our housing prices, and it will only get worse. My question for you is that 26% enough of an outlier that you can feel comfortable being at 90% of the market value? Or do you have any ability to say, this is an exceptional year? Is this a long-term change? Or are you sort of tied to that level of accuracy?
Mr. President, Councilman Strader, that's really a good question. And yes, we do have some leeway. In fact, we've only, my 27 years as being assessor, we've only exercised that once, and that was last year. It was this time last year that everything was really shutting down. Housing, actually, the year started out very strong. The first January and February of last year started out very strong, but March and April, the market really appeared that it was on the verge of collapse. And so is what we did. Rather than being at 98% value, we decided to be a little bit softer, and we shot for 94%, and that's exactly where we ended up, 94% last year. This year, we are probably looking at maybe about a 96 to 97% level, and I think we'll find that on the commercial too. And it's just mainly if we were at, we'll say 90% last year, and we thought the market was going to collapse, we really would not be able to exercise, that judgment, like, let's just go a little bit easier this year to see how things turn out. We would be in jeopardy of falling out of compliance. And I just noticed in a report from the Tax Commission, last year they had the highest number of counties and categories out of compliance. and I don't know, in a decade or a year or whatever, but it was an unusually large number of counties that were out of compliance. They were below the acceptable market value.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. President?
Mr. Borton?
Bob, how many of our Treasure Valley legislators contact you, if any, to run scenarios on if we make this adjustment in the property, the homeowner's exemption, for example, to have you help facilitate making sound decisions, if any?
Mr. President, Councilman Borton, not very many.
Is it like zero?
Yes. Once in a while, I'll have, someone will call with a question, and we can give them some information. But typically, it's the tax commission's the conduit, or our Association of Idaho Cities. They will call us, and we'll get that information. They'll do the analysis. But as far as the legislators, we don't really get much. And if I could have just another couple of minutes. Speaking of this, we did have some legislators come into my office this last year. We just wanted to brief them on what's going on. They had questions. For example, last fall, there was a legislative interim committee to study property taxes. I think you're all aware of that. And someone said the assessor is way off on values. They used, for example, there's a building downtown in Boise called the University Key. We had it assessed at $8 million. Boise State University purchased it for $12 million. So it was like, why is the assessor so far off on this purchase? Another example in that same context was there was a home on State Street. They were widening State Street. We had it assessed at $400,000. The highway district paid, I believe it was about $700,000 on this. So we explained to the legislator, the reason we do that is because of the laws that they have passed. This law specifically is we have to assess at actual and functional use. We can't assess it at potential use. We can't assess it at investment use. We have to do it exactly at actual and functional use. So when we assessed the University Key at $8 million, that was an office building being used. Who knows what Boise State's motivation was for that building? And by the way, they would not give the appraisal to that legislator that was talking to us, had asked for it. That single-family home on State Street, the highway district paid $300,000 more. Again, we had to assess it as a single-family residential property. The highway district wanted it for some other use, and they were willing to spend that. But so we're really locked in to these laws. In this particular law, we have to assess at actual and functional use, not highest and best use. So, anyway, sorry about that. Just I thought it was an important point that needed to be made, because people are always saying they are so far off.
That's interesting. I have a lot of questions for you, Bob, but they might be better served maybe in your office.
I would be happy to come to your office. You can come to my office, and we can be happy to visit with you about it.
It's interesting information. Council, any more questions for Mr. McQuaid? Thank you. I always love your presentations. My mind just like is going a million miles per hour right now, and they're just super interesting, so I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's obviously really interesting to me, too, and it's certainly important to all of us, those especially in the arena that we're in, where we're levying against those values.
Perfect.
Mr. President, council members, so good to see you in person.
So good. Thanks, Bob. Have a great day.
Thank you.
On to action items. Item number 2, we have a public hearing for Volante Investments. That's item number H-2020-0118. We'll start off with staff report.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. The applications before you are a
Sonia,
request.
I don't mean to, don't mean to interrupt, I apologize. I have one question for Bill before you start. Bill, Mr. Borton made a interesting question about, do we want to open up these both at the same time, because they're almost quasi, they're the same, Not the same same people, I guess, the same project.
I would, Mr. President, members of the council, I would do them one at a time, just so the record's clear. This is the conversation on this item,
Okay,
and a separate one.
perfect. Thanks, Bill.
Mr. Neri, if I may clarify, if you're not aware, the staff report was written to include both
It's the same staff report, that's what I was thinking.
projects.
Right.
Oh, you're right. I apologize. You're right. So they can go ahead and hold them both.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, so just for the record, opening item number 2 and 3, H-2020-0118, and item number 3, which is H-2021-0007.
Mr. Chair, members of the council. The applications before you tonight are a request for a development agreement modification, a preliminary plat, and a conditional use permit. This site consists of 34.62 acres of land. It's zoned CG, General Retail and Service Commercial District. It's located at 2600 and 2700 East Overland Road. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation for the property is mixed use regional. A development agreement modification is proposed to exclude the east parcel from the existing development agreement and for a new development agreement for the east parcel to include a conceptual development plan for the site as required. The proposed development plan for the east 15.89 acre parcel is for a 360-unit multifamily residential development consisting of a mix of studio, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units in 10 structures. Parking is proposed in excess of UDC standards. There are a total of 9 extra spaces proposed. A total of 3.8 acres of outdoor common open space is proposed, which exceeds the minimum 2.1 acres required. A minimum of 5 amenities are required, but the decision-making body is authorized to consider additional similar amenities if they believe the proposed amenities aren't adequate for the size of the development. Amenities consist of a clubhouse with a swimming pool, bike maintenance room, fitness facilities, parcel lockers, remote work classroom stations, and a coffee bar, an outdoor fireplace with seating and a barbecue, public art, half-mile pedestrian loop with a 10-foot wide pathway and internal pathways, 18 grassy areas of at least 50 by 50 feet in size, including a dog park, multiple courtyards, park areas with seating, a plaza, and pocket libraries, a community garden, and a children's play structure. A mix of 2- and 3-story structures in a contemporary farmhouse theme are proposed, as shown. Final design is required to comply with the design standards in the Architectural Standards Manual. A preliminary plat is proposed, consisting of 3 buildable lots on 34.62 acres of land in the CG zoning district. It is proposed to develop in 2 phases. The first phase consists of the extension of South Wells Avenue to East Cinema Drive. So Wells is the north-south street here. Cinema Drive is the east-west. The first phase, as I said, it consists of the extension of South Wells Avenue to East Cinema Drive and includes the east parcel. The second phase consists of the extension of East Cinema Drive from Wells to the west boundary of the site and includes the west parcel. Right-of-way for the extension of South Wells Avenue and East Cinema Drive is proposed to be dedicated with the plat. In order to provide interconnectivity between uses in a timelier manner and to disperse traffic, staff is recommending the extension of East Cinema Drive from the west boundary of the site to South Wells Avenue occurs with the first phase of development rather than the second as proposed. The commission did reaffirm staff's recommendation, and that is currently a condition of approval. The applicant is not in agreement with this condition and requests it is removed, and that is condition number 3C. Written testimony received since the commission hearing was received from Deb Nelson at Givens Pursley and from Greg Goins, Winco Foods. They are requesting the condition requiring the extension of Cinema Drive with the first phase of development be changed to the second phase of development as proposed with the plat. And from Chanel Buckner, she opposes the development due to the high density proposed, which she feels will add to the increasing traffic and crime in the area. That concludes staff's presentation.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay. Turn the time over to Deb. Sounds like she'll do the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. Deborah Nelson. My address is 601 West Bannock Street. Before I begin, I have to acknowledge Lisa Holland, who is a friend and colleague, and will be missed by the entire development community and the economic development community. I know she had a special place in Meridian and in Cuna, but know that she's loved everywhere. So my condolences to her family. Tonight, I am here for the applicant for the Seasons at Meridian Apartments, Morgan Holdings in Stone Hill, and representatives of that applicant team are here with me and are available to answer any of your questions. Thank you so much to Sonia for her hard work and collaboration on this project. We are in full agreement with her project report and the Commission's recommendation, except the one condition, as she mentioned, and I'll discuss that this evening. Let's see. So the proposed apartments are on a 16-acre parcel at 2700 East Overland that's outlined in yellow here. The site was part of a larger annexation and zoned as CG in 1994. And in 2016, the city approved a development agreement governing both the apartments project site and the Windcoast site to our west, outlined in blue here. Just to briefly look at that DA to give some context for this project, the 2016 DA condition number 2 allows development of the Windcoast site at 2600 Overland consistent with the concept plan. And that DA concept plan shows an 85,000 square foot retail building north of Cinema Drive and vacant land on the south. The same development agreement in condition 3 says that to develop the eastern parcel, our project site for the apartments at 2700 Overland, the DA just requires a DA modification to include that new concept plan consistent with your future land use map. And that's the context for our application to include a DA modification to provide that concept plan and, as Sonia noted, to separate out the ownership with the new developer of the apartments. And as Sonia describes in her staff report, the proposed multifamily use and development plan is consistent with the mixed-use regional designation in your future land use map because it contributes to the use with the higher density residential that's really needed in this area. It's already largely developed and planned with commercial and employment uses, but there's not a lot of residential. And as you can see from this map, this particular MUR designation is a large area, 650 acres actually. And that large area has the extensive retail and office uses, but is well below the target range in your comp plan of 6 to 40 units per acre. Currently, this entire area has only a 1.27 units per acre. That, let's stay there for a second. That residential deficit is particularly striking in the northwest quadrant where this site is located, in that 130 acres that's northwest of Overland and Eagle, where the current residential density is only 0.06 units per acre. And as the staff report notes, in support of this application, the higher density residential is going to support those commercial and employment uses, providing customers and employees that can walk to work, and also provides a great transition from the low density single family residential in the county to our east and the large retail to our west. So in addition to the DA modification application, we're also requesting preliminary plat. Just a little context for why we're doing that. The city and Winco Foods previously believed the apartment site was a separate legal parcel, but as we dug into that with this application, it's not clear that that was that the records are available for that. There may have been an administrative lot split in the past because there were separate building permits and driveways permitted, but those records have not been found. So we're providing the preliminary plat to clean this up and ensure legal lots. We've proposed 2 phases. The phase 1 includes the apartments and the extension of Wells Avenue, also the signal. Phase 2 includes the remaining Winco Foods parcel with 2 lots and the extension of Cinema Drive, and ACHD has approved that phasing. The Seasons at Meridian will include 3.8 acres, which is 24% of qualified open space. which exceeds the city code's requirements, and because only 2.1 acres is required here. There will be internal pathways and sidewalks that link throughout the site, including a perimeter half-mile walking loop. The site includes a dog park, a large centrally located clubhouse area with pool and barbecue and seating, courtyards within each building enclave. Significant landscape buffers provide attractive screening along with all perimeter borders. The Seasons at Meridian will also provide 26 qualified amenities. I apologize, my slides are out of sequence. Can I pause for a moment? Let me step back. Let me step back to the buildings here. My apologies. Thank you. First, looking at the site plan before we go into further details about the open space and amenities, just want to show this arrangement, and in particular, I think I'll jump right to the aerial, showing how well the building arrangement creates this urban-like block pattern that's called for in your comprehensive plan for MUR areas, really nicely framing the open space and is interlaced with the landscaped pathways and the boulevard entrance. And these L-shaped buildings really create that intimate open space in between each of the areas that the commission really liked. Each building has been designed to create a sense of scale by incorporating a blend of 2- and 3-story roof lines, softening the overall massing of the architecture. The pedestrian access is provided by several formalized enhanced entry gates for each building that conceal the stairways away from public view. And these apartments will include a mix of studios, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom, ranging in size. Each unit is carefully designed with the private patios and balconies to create that indoor-outdoor space, and the interior designed with open, spacious floor plans and an abundance of glass. Informal living and dining areas have large island kitchens, ideal for entertaining, and other amenities include large bedrooms with walk-in closets, dual vanities and master suites, large showers, and ample storage space. The architectural theme is contemporary farmhouse, a combination of vertical board and batten siding, stucco, and decorative balcony rails, along with varied color schemes, create a soft and well-balanced exterior facade. We've touched on the open space, the excessive acres there. Let's jump to the amenities. Seasons at Meridian is going to provide 26 qualified amenities. Only 5 are required for this site under your code. And they're going to represent each of the 3 categories listed in your code. The clubhouse has fitness facilities, the bike maintenance room, remote work and classroom stations, a coffee bar. Outdoor amenities include outdoor fireplace and seating and barbecue, a plaza, community garden, a pool, children's play structure, and walking trails. These slides provide some imagery for the architecture and the quality of design for the clubhouse and amenities that are available to these residents. The interior images show the fitness rooms and workspaces and gathering spaces, and some more imagery of the pool area. The clubhouse includes the property management office, the maintenance storage area, central mailbox, and also these great electronic parcel lockers that allow residents to receive parcels even when they're not home and access them with a code that they receive. The Seasons at Meridian was carefully designed to integrate with the surrounding uses. The tree-lined east-west driveway aligns with Cinema Drive, which will ultimately extend through the Winco parcels when it's developed, creating this visual and physical integration to the commercial uses to the west. On our east side, there's single-family residential, a county subdivision that does not allow vehicular connectivity, but we still provide that pedestrian connectivity and welcome these residents to enjoy our walking paths. We've also created a significant buffer between the proposed project and the existing homes to our east to ensure compatibility. Our buildings are set back over 100 feet from the side property line, and the average setback of our neighboring residences is over 250 feet. The project will maximize and use existing city services because it is an infill project. Will connect to adjacent utilities. We're located close to existing fire and police infrastructure. ACHD has reviewed and approved the traffic study, and we have no concerns with their conditions of approval. The schools, the project will have very minimal impact on school enrollment. Based on West Ada's projections, we will only generate 36 students. So as noted, we're in complete agreement with staff report with just one exception. I'd like to touch on that condition. Staff's recommended condition A3C of the preliminary plat would require Cinema Drive to be built with Phase 1 rather than with the Phase 2 commercial development as contemplated in the development agreement and as proposed in the phased preliminary plat that has been approved by ACHD. I want to touch on the reasons for that. I mean, first of all, the extension of Cinema Drive is not necessary to serve the apartments, which is the only use in Phase 1. The apartments have primary access from the extension of Wells Avenue and secondary access to Overland. The traffic impact study that was prepared for the Seasons at Meridian Apartments assumed that no traffic, no trips would go on Cinema Drive, knowing that that was for a later phase. And with those assumptions, still meet all levels of service at the intersection of Wells and Overland and on the segment of Overland in front of us. And that's why ACHD approved that phasing plan. Pedestrian access is already existing as well along the sidewalk, along the entire frontage of Overland there, connecting our residents to businesses to the west, all located within a quarter mile. And not only is that road not needed now, but it would be problematic to advance this requirement. It is going to be built with Phase 2, but advancing it from Phase 2 to Phase 1 creates some problems. Winco Foods, not the apartments applicant, controls that property. And as you can see from the April 26, 2021 letter from Greg Goins with Winco Foods, Winco supports the apartments but objects to this condition for a few reasons. Most importantly, the precise location for Cinema Drive is not yet known. Until they know exactly what the retail uses that are going to be on that parcel that's south of Cinema Drive, they don't know the exact configuration. And they won't know that till they finalize their development plans with Phase 2.
I don't mean to interrupt, Deb. So will that affect where the entrance is in your project that you're representing?
Council President, no, the endpoints are known on each side, and we will align each endpoint, but the exact trajectory in the middle from west to east to our access point is the placement that's unknown. Another problem with constructing the road now, it would prematurely end the farming operations that are ongoing on that parcel until the development is done on Phase 2. This will create a maintenance burden because the road would bisect it east-west, the core gets run north-south, and so it could not be farmed in its current configuration, creating weed and dust control management issues. And finally, advancing the road that requirement now places a significant additional cost burden on the apartments applicant, who is already absorbing the full cost of the signal, which was required for the original Winco. So with that, we ask for your approval of the DA modification to add the new concept plan as was contemplated in that 2016 DA. We ask for your approval of the conditional use permit for the apartments as recommended by staff and the commission. And we ask for your approval of the preliminary plat to clean up that legal parcel history, create the 3 lots, but without the condition of approval advancing that Cinema Drive extension. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Council, any questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Hoagland.
Yeah, question then, as we're talking about traffic and road alignments and those types of things, is the signal at Wells and Overland going to go in upon completion of the apartments? When does that timing take place?
Council President, Councilmember Hoagland, before the occupancy for the apartments. So with the apartments, before there's any use there, the signal will be there.
Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Nelson?
I have one more.
Okay, Mr. Hoagland.
Deb, I want to raise the parking issue. It's 9 extra spaces are proposed for a 360-unit development, and it does meet our requirements. And but at the same time, it seems like when I drive around and look at things, there's definitely, if you get 10% of the people invite someone over and they drive there, you got 36 extra cars. And, you know, not everyone has 2 vehicles. Sometimes they have more, but is there any other place to find more parking in that development?
Council President, Councilmember Hoagland, thanks for the question, because it is great to explain. We're providing 655 parking spaces, which is 24 spaces more than your code requires for residences. And Sonia is correct to say that overall in the application, we have 9 extra spaces. And the reason is that the city code requires 16 spaces for a non-residential use. And the way staff interprets that, they apply that to our clubhouse. So really in function, though, our clubhouse is a residential amenity. There won't be outside people coming in largely to use that. And so we expect that those 16 spaces are really available for the residents as well, creating a balance of 24, which is a very overparked apartments from the developer's experience and need and demand by their clientele. And even if there were guests, which would certainly be welcome for the apartment residents to have guests to use the clubhouse is only open 9 to 6. And so when parking is really in demand at apartments overnight, it will be available no matter what, even if there were guests that were coming to use the clubhouse space. So I hope that gives you some additional feel for the amount that we feel it's overparked, 24 over the requirements in your code for the residents.
Mr. President, Deb, that does help. Thank you.
President?
Mr. Kavanagh.
Deb, can you pull back up the site plan? To your presentation's point, there's a lot of amenities that are being presented within this project. I'm hoping you could maybe walk council through, maybe go back one more or 2 more, or 2 more.
Well, I don't know which one shows it best. Did I pass it?
Thought you did.
This is the problem with them being out of sequence from my concern earlier.
Right there.
Does that help?
Yeah, if you could maybe walk us through where, clearly I know where the pool and the clubhouse are, but can you kind of walk us through where all the other amenities are placed throughout the site?
Council President and Councilmember Kavanagh, I will start that, and then I may invite our client up because I think he can do a better job than I can in describing that. But just in general terms, the dog park is up in that northeast corner. Can you see if it doesn't show up on there? The kind of light green triangle that's up there. The clubhouse amenities, you can see the pool and all of the outdoor fireplace and barbecue and seating that goes around that pool. And then within each of the enclaves, I love the way the buildings are arranged. They create these interior courtyards, and there's actually a theme that goes with each of these interior courtyards that matches the seasons. And they have different amenities within each of these courtyards to appeal to different residents' desires. So with that, I think I'd invite Ryan to maybe give a little more flavor on that, if that's okay with you. Okay.
Members of the council, Mr. President. Ryan Morgan, 1400 Little Raven Street.
Eat the mic. You might need to eat the
Oh,
mic.
can you hear me? Ryan Morgan, 1400 Little Raven Street. Members of the council, Mr. President. Mouse does not work. So Deb pointed out most of the spaces, and like she was saying, the courtyards are actually the seasons. The 4 seasons that we have, we actually can count 5 courtyards. So we have summer twice because we really enjoy the summer season. On the south side of the picture, you can kind of see a little seating area right over the word Overland, and that's matched kind of on the right where the cinema kind of extends and ends. That's kind of where we're going to have these are both pocket seating areas, as well on the north side. So kind of a triangle around the site. We have these nice little seating areas. Our plan is to have a little library section outside where cinema ends. Let's see, the walking path kind of meanders around the edge of the site. And a lot of connectivity. We wanted the driveway to, when you drive in, to be different than all of the different drive lanes. So it has that really sense of place. It's really green. We want you to feel like you're coming home, right? I think what's different us from other developers is being able to create that sense of place, right? So the parking is on the outside, so when you're inside your apartment and you really look into these courtyards, you feel like you're within a smaller community within a larger community. And then the ability to be able to walk everywhere and access everything just makes that a broader place of place.
Mr. President.
Mr. Kavanagh.
Ryan, can you, my assumption is that each of your buildings have a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms.
In studios, correct.
Can you walk us through, when I start seeing 2 and 3 bedrooms, I start thinking young families. So obviously where children have an opportunity to play and recreate. Can you walk us through kind of how that plays out and where those amenities that would benefit children would be located?
Of course, I did not mention the tot lot. So if you see where the pool is, just north of that, there's like a little, looks like a sandy area. That's planned to be the tot lot. And then just to the right of that is actually kind of a trellised yard where we imagine people bringing lawn chairs and hanging out and throwing the Frisbee. And that's kind of like our evening summer session, which is kind of an extension of the pool and incorporated in like the greater clubhouse sense. It's actually pretty amazing. Our architect was able to actually copy and paste the same efficiencies of every single building. So the unit mix in every building is the exact same. So they're mirrored against each side. So we kind of focus all of our outdoor spaces central to the clubhouse where the tot lot is, but then in each courtyard as well. You know, the winter we have a big fireplace. Summer there's different grilling areas. Spring I believe we have our planting gardening beds. And then the dog park again is at the top. We try to keep the dog park away from most people. A lot of people love dogs and want to be near a dog park, so we allow those northern buildings to have that access. But we want to be cognizant of people and noises.
Mr. President.
Ms. Strader.
Thank you very much. It's not your math. West Data estimates 36 students from this 300-plus apartment project. Just curious what your opinion is based on other developments that you've done. Do you think that is a realistic number of students entering the school system?
Yeah. Mr. President, Ms. Rader. Yes, I do. I've built projects for millennials. I've also built projects for families. The number of 3 bedrooms we have in this community is not a lot. And we really believe that more families will be focused in the 3 bedrooms rather than the 2s, 1s, and studios. And we really see this more as a transition for families. They're talking earlier about the restriction on homes, people coming in not being able to buy homes or put down payments on. So we really see our 3 bedrooms as that people moving in, staying for 1 or maybe 2 years while they're looking for a home, while they're in transition, moving to Meridian or trying to find their permanent residence. So we don't believe that this is going to be heavily geared towards students. We believe some families, yes, will be living there, but it's not our assumption that it will be have as many families as you would say maybe north of us or closer to Eagle.
Quick follow-up, Mr. President.
Go ahead.
So how many 3 bedrooms will you have in the complex?
That's a very good question. I believe there are a little less than 36.
Pretty specific.
About 10%. And so we did talk with Marcy earlier with the school district, and she kind of ran us through the math, which was interesting. They believe they assign 10% of the units to students, and they divide that by 13 grades. And then it's essentially 4 students per grade. It's 2.97, I believe. And so for high school, which is 4 grades, that is 11 students. And so I believe the numbers that you have, the high school, which we confirmed earlier today, it's over populated by 3 students just down the street. So the 11 to the 3 would be what the addition, according to her math, would be.
Yeah, thank you. It's not your math. You don't need to own their math. But I'm having a hard time. We used to say it was 0.8 students was kind of our formula, and we seem to be going in a very different direction. So I'm just trying to get some feedback from the development community if there's a good grounding in that. But your number of 3 bedrooms gives me some idea. That's helpful.
There are a number of other developments coming on with a heavier set of 3 bedrooms that we believe cater more towards that family lifestyle. 33 3 bedrooms. 30? Thank you. 30. Oh, I wanted to say one thing about the parking earlier. We never expect to be 100% full as well. We estimate typically around 95%. So that's about, I believe 18 units less than full, which if you multiply by 2 has been another 36 parking spaces that we believe will be in excess.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hoagland?
a question, in doing the reading and research on this, there was something about windows and R value and soundproofing. Since you are up against the off-ramp, whatnot, can you explain that a little more?
Oh, of course. So noise is a big concern. So we used a local sound engineer to go and walk the site and sit kind of where the edge of our buildings will be, as you can see here, and really do kind of sound testing to see what you would be hearing from the interstate. And it's actually interesting, if you look at the interstate and then the off-ramp and then kind of back set to where our building is, we're actually pretty offset from the actual traffic that's traveling along the highway. The sound engineer did not recommend a sound wall or anything over and above creating soundproofing. They recommended higher STC ratings, which we'll be going through in the design process using the sound engineer, but they didn't believe anything above and beyond was necessary.
I got a question for you.
Please.
So your exterior design looks pretty cool.
Thanks.
I mean, you're like Idaho here, you know, it's Meridian to be specific. So I like the urban / farm look. I think it's pretty. Have you done that look in other places? Is this? Do you have pictures that I could see what that looks like?
We have a website with a lot of projects we've done. We changed the looks. You know, a lot of the time the design is dictated by design guidelines. An example is I built in Charlotte, North Carolina. 65% of every elevation had to have brick.
Oh,
It's a lot of brick.
yeah.
And they didn't want any color other than white, than brick. And so you can't really play a lot. What's really wonderful about here is the guidelines allow us to be creative and really, accentuate something different. You know, there's a lot of apartment buildings that kind of go with, I wouldn't say the cheapest finishes, but they don't get creative. And one thing I love about our team is our ability to be a little out of the box. And so we think what we're designing really does fit in with the community, but also stands out from, a lot of the copy and paste that you see a lot of other places.
Right. Cool.
Did I answer your question?
Sorta. I'm good. I like that design. I think it's pretty cool.
No, thank you.
One thing I like about it is how each individual section has its own community to a certain degree. I think it's awesome.
That's really important to us. And one thing as well, it's hard to tell here on the elevations. The experience is very important to us.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times you'll walk apartment communities and you'll see the condensing units on the ground, which is easy for maintenance, but I believe is very burdensome and loud and kind of in the way. If you see these white areas kind of in the middle of the buildings, those are over the corridors, and that's where we plan on putting all of our AC units. Right? So we kind of think through really how people are interacting, how they're going by, and what, creating a pleasant home environment. But our architect did an incredible job too, and allowing the stairwells on the inside, so you're not driving by looking at stairwells, I thought was really smart.
Different. Council, any more questions?
Yeah, Mr. President,
Mr. Morton?
as we look at the site plan, and there's reference in the staff report to at least discussions upon cross-access to the east. Some of the benefits of the sequence of this is this goes in before the large lots to the east get redeveloped.
Mm-hmm.
It looks at least that it's designed for potential cross-access to the east, but is that the intent of the design, or?
It's not the intent of the design. We've talked about it. Right. I've talked with a number of the neighbors, but in the owners to the northeast, who own that, I believe, 2 lots up there, but it was never expressed to us explicitly, like, hey, let's connect this. It's been mentioned in a few meetings, but we're open to things, but it's never kind of really fully been executed. But
Council President, Councilmember Borton, just to add, your code doesn't require cross-access where you've got residential to commercial, and I think the concern that we've discussed as we've tried to explore that, whether there is an opportunity there, is it's likely, or quite possible at least, that the community to our east, if it redevelops, would redevelop as commercial or a mixed use, and that would create a traffic burden through the residential, which is why your code doesn't require cross-access between residential and commercial. So I think that's the concern, is the unknown. But we did align that drive with Cinema Drive to create at least that integration in appearance, and certainly to the west. And then on the east, it creates that pedestrian connectivity. But I think you guys have aligned an amenity there, a seating area and a pocket library right there at the end to create that pedestrian connectivity there, but it doesn't connect through vehicularly. Just to add to that discussion of what we've considered.
I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about the north drive, not the center drive. But
No, and the report talks about that discussion, pros and cons. It's not required, but it could be a condition, but staff didn't include it as a condition of approval that there be cross-access, and I think the explanation makes good sense why it wouldn't be. But you had it sort of buttressed with the seating area, and I think of the pocket library, which I just have to ask. Is it literally like a little tiny library, pocket library? How is that an amenity? Like a community book share setup?
essentially correct.
Yeah, okay.
Benches, outdoor seating areas, trellises, just a nice place to sit down and read your books if people still use paper books.
What are you saying?
Is it the idea, as if it's going to be an amenity, is it literally like a constructed little kiosk where people leave a book, take a book?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Like you'd see in a neighborhood or in different pocket parks
I
around
think it's a
the
great idea.
city.
So, Mr. President, one follow-up question on that. The design elements that you provided are really attractive, and it begs the question that one area where we've seen well-done projects maybe fall short, because it's a CUP, we got to bring it up, are the carports, right, which are noticeably absent from this picture, but can you give us some detail on how the carports might be designed to be so attractive and unique to match the wonderful, unique design of the buildings themselves, and not just flat metal roofs that detract from the beautiful project?
If I tried to build that, my architect would probably try to kill me. No, we want something that blends in with the architecture. We're not going to just pick something off the shelf and just go with it. You know, a lot of contemplation obviously has gone into how our site ties into itself, and then surrounding landscaping, and so the carports are going to match that aesthetic. We haven't designed them yet. We kind of wait until these meetings to break into that. But I'm not planning on just putting something ugly in front of these beautiful buildings.
Is there a way, and you can think about this and maybe in rebuttal bring it up, but is there a way to articulate that today somehow as one of the conditions as part of this to help describe, and I'm not sure how to do it here on the fly, but something that provides some context to what they might look like? Just something to think about as we go through this.
I'll say I'm the dumb developer, and I hire very smart landscape architects and architects who know design.
Okay.
So I really work with my teams on that aesthetic. If I tried calling out architectural terms, I would stumble over myself. Okay. So I really rely on my teams to create the beautiful sites that you see.
Okay.
Mr. Kavanagh?
Mumbling under my breath that maybe staff could help with that, Mr. President.
Okay.
But I want this to be a beautiful project. I'll say that.
Interesting project. Any more questions for the applicant? No? Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Since this is a public hearing, Mr. Mayor, do we have anyone scheduled to testify?
Mr. President, you called me Mr. Mayor. Just want to point that out.
excuse
So
me.
thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
I will.
Mr. Clerk?
I will keep my current role, but
That's fine.
we had one advanced sign up, Todd Eberling.
Call me something earlier, Mr. What?
I only ask if your middle initial had multiple meanings.
I apologize for that, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President, council members. Todd Ebling, 3536 South Lamone. And just to give you just a tiny bit of background, I moved from Portland, my family, our business, 10 years ago. And so I don't consider myself a veteran, but I do consider myself lived here long enough to have seen some changes. Things were, depressed more 10 years ago. Long story short, we ended up building a house on the south side, same neighborhood as Mayor Robert, and have become increasingly concerned with the congestion. And I know some of that can be relieved through road improvements, and ACHD is slowly rolling that out and working on that. And Overland, this project on Overland is a concern because, it's already a 5-lane boulevard. And with that being already 5-lane, I know ACHD does their traffic tests, and they put out their strips and they do their counting and all that stuff. But I have to say, I speak for myself, my family, friends, neighbors, and business associates, being a businessman in the community in the heart of Meridian. We've done our own traffic studies, and honestly, it's going from bad to worse. And with that said, I can't imagine that this is good for the community. And I'm scratching my head as I think of myself as reasonable intelligence and strategy thinking as a business guy in the community. And I scratch my head just thinking, wow, is this really helping the livability and the quality of Meridian? And I'm sure when I say we the people, I'm speaking for myself, family, neighbors, business associates, and yourselves. Do you wake up in the morning and go, golly, and I'm really hoping to see some more congestion in our area. And I know that you're not. I know you're good people. I've looked you up and read your bios, and you like me probably have ideals. And I just think that this thing is commercial general along that strip of the freeway and on both sides of Overland. I personally think, and I speak for those that I've talked to, friends, family, business associates, and neighbors, it should stay commercial general. It just makes sense. I mean, that whole area is commercial general. Why throw this in the mix and add to the congestion that we already have that's going from bad to worse? And I'm sure you experience that in your own neighborhoods where you live. If you hit the roads at the wrong time, it's not a good thing. Does that mean it's time? All right. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for me?
Mr. President.
Mr. Luke?
Todd, thanks for being here. Appreciate your testimony. I think you touch on something that we at council hear a lot, and I think that we wrestle with, which is, I don't think any of us wake up, to your point, I don't think any of us wake up and say, let's bring on more congestion, right?
Right.
And so one of the things that I always wrestle with, because I think some of the questions you raise, I've raised myself as I've reviewed this, is what's going to generate more traffic on Overland? Is it going to be more commercial with cars coming in and going out all the time, or residential that kind of has, again, less ongoing traffic on a regular basis? And so I'm curious if you've kind of explored that and kind of what conclusion you've drawn.
Well, I mentioned that we moved 10 years ago from Portland, and Portland is pretty renowned for its love affair with high density. And I mean, they'll squeeze some crazy stuff on some crazy small properties. And so we moved here for the quality of life, having visited here for 25 years. And that quality of life was what attracted us to this area. So one could say we were escaping the negative effect of a out-of-control, high-density planning and zoning commission in Portland and Multnomah County. If you're familiar with that at all, it's really gotten pretty horrendous. And we, just as a family, as business people, don't want to see that happen to Meridian. I understand in planning and zoning, and I have friends back in Portland that have worked for the city of Portland and been involved in high-rise apartment projects and also in residential. And sometimes we argue about stuff, but they're pretty honest with me, and they say that, they've had to learn to play ball in Portland because of the way it is. And but they regret having to be involved in that. And they, too, would like to move here. And I'm like, well, you might just vet this place first because it's just getting like that. So, I mean, to make a long story short, we love this place. We love living and working here, employing people here in our business. And we'd like to see the livability and the quality stay balanced. And that balance really is, I understand that there's going to be some high density and there's going to be there's the mix, there's the balance that goes on in planning a community. I'd like to see the scales tip to the less negative impact of more congestion, to make a long story short.
Mr. President. Todd, I appreciate your comments, because you are really touching on the struggle that we do have, and, developing a comprehensive plan, and the new one was adopted in 2019, and then we got the future land use map, and the things we struggle with as we grow, and we're continuing to grow, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon, and you heard the assessors' numbers tonight, and so how do we do things like public transportation? How do we have the densities to make that viable? And because we don't have really great public transportation, we just haven't had the densities and the population. So those are the things that we're always trying to figure out, and or at least it's new to us. I mean, we don't have it. It hasn't been long established. We've just been a car culture, and it's going to be hard to get away from that. But what type of, if we look at this property, you talk about more commercial, are you thinking, is it office? Is it where we have a retail component there on the west side? What type of component would be on the east side in your mind? How do you see that?
Well, I see it as that whole entire strip there. You've got some service, you've got some food related, you've got some businesses, some offices. And so I guess that falls under your commercial general zoning, and that it's got some leeway to go to lean this way and to lean that way. And in that commercial general, I mean, a Winco store is going to generate this ongoing traffic, and I get that. But under that commercial general, wouldn't that be that you're approving a mixture of businesses that could come in there? And of course, in the balance of our community, we do need to have land that people can set up shop in. And, like us, we're in light industrial, and that's kind of a whole different game than retail on a boulevard like that. But it's like, it just makes sense that if I was a business that fell under the commercial general and needed some access from a street like Overland, I would think that I'd want to be in that neighborhood. I wouldn't want to be in another neighborhood that has less going on. Because people go to that area, and maybe on their way to the theater, they're going to hit the Sonic, or they're going to hit my restaurant that I have there, or maybe they're going to hit, get an oil change or something. You know what I'm saying? It's like people go to an area to get stuff done, and then they can kill a couple birds with one stone. So it's like, I mean, wow. I look at the map, what would be called the flum, and of course there's the updated zoning map, which shows the commercial general, and then you've got the flum that shows mixed use in that same area. So I was looking at that today, and it's like, okay, it's kind of interesting, but there's a whole lot of purple there that is commercial general. And I think from a negative impact of, like I said, you go and do your own study on Overland. You hit Overland wrong, man, it's nasty. And I don't know if you're impacted by that, but I am, because I live on the south side, and our family is, and friends are, yeah. So, it's, that's the concern. I mean, I get development. I mean, there's gonna be raw land that gets developed. I get that. But I just say, man, let's not tip the scales too heavy in that direction. And in a perfect world, I think should be tipped back the other way, really, at the end of the day.
Mr. President, just to follow up, and Todd, I appreciate the comments, and with your looking at things, and if we go into the comprehensive plan again and do some things like that, I encourage you to be involved. You bring some perspective. That's good. and this is a situation too where it's already baked into the map, it's done, and there's some protection. I think what makes the unique site is you got single-family homes in an area that's grown up commercial. So now, how do we buffer that from this massive, big box retail type of thing? So I think that was the way this kind of played out for this particular location. So.
Well, Winco would certainly be an anchor for other small businesses if it
Yeah.
went back that way to commercial.
Yeah, but I appreciate it, and that's something to keep your finger in, and as a city will grow, but let's try to grow it the right way. So, appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President, council members, for your time.
Mr. President, that's the only advanced sign up. You do have some people online as well as others in the room.
Mr. Clerk, I don't know how Mayor Simison checks out who those people are here, but on my...
Mr. President, he just lets them know they can raise their hand via the Zoom platform or in person.
Isn't there a way that I can check it out?
If you see attendees at the bottom of your screen,
Oh, I see. Okay.
or participants, and then the button that pops up, panelists and attendees. Attendees are the guests that are here.
I just need to switch it to the other screen. Got it. Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify? All right. No one online? I don't see anyone raising up their hands online. So with that, I would invite the applicant to come back up and to...
Hang it. Sorry, Mr. President.
Oh, Deputy Chief Bongiorno, there you are.
I wasn't quick enough on the trigger. I was trying.
That's okay.
I just wanted to let council and know that I support staff with requesting that Cinema Drive be added because of what Mr. Everly mentioned with the amount of traffic that's already on Eagle Road, with the high school right there, with Harley Davidson, with Rudy's, all the other popular places that are in that area. Just giving me another access to the apartment building through via cinema. Sonia and I had some pretty long discussions about it, and I support staff's recommendation to build that with the first phase. So I just wanted to let Mr. President and council know that.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Okey-doke.
Mr. President, there is a hand raised now. I don't know if you're still accepting that.
We are. Okay. Josh. Is it Josh?
Josh, we're inviting him into the room. It'll just be a few seconds while he rejoins.
Josh, if you can hear me, if you can state your name and address for the record, please. You have 3 minutes when you're on.
Mr. President, he may not have heard you as he was rejoining the meeting, but Josh, you've been recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Clerk, is there a way that he can call in, if we could provide him a number?
The number is on the agenda. He can call that. He's unmuted, so it appears he has audio. I'm not sure if he's unable to hear us or...
Where'd he go? Mr. Clerk, did he mute himself?
He was muted, then I sent a request to unmute. I'm going to remove him temporarily. Whoops, wrong button. He'll come back in as an attendee, and then I can unmute him that way, perhaps.
Mr. Clerk, is there a way that you can put something on the screen that shows a number that he can call in if he needs to? If he doesn't have the agenda in front of him?
I can do that.
Can you guys hear me?
There we go.
Yep.
Time is yours, Josh. You have 3 minutes. State if you could state your name and address for the public record.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Having audio problems with the computer.
No worries.
So I had to call in. Josh Sorelli, 1435 Loader Place. I am one of the homes to the east. Couple concerns that I've had that I have not had definitive answers on is A, the irrigation that runs through that lot. Have yet to see any studies or anything, and we currently have water issues with the irrigation that goes through there. It actually backs up due to the elevation changes actually going through that lot, and it actually spills over onto Loader Place. So one of my issues is just wondering what the plan is for the irrigation that runs through the northeast corner of that lot. I don't know if they're going to culvert it or what their intentions are there. Also, there was a discussion for a fence and a need for a permanent design of that fence on the east side to block off our areas to the apartment complex, and have yet to see a definitive answer on that as well. Haven't seen any plans or thoughts on that. Definitely concerned about the traffic light that is going to be backing up traffic to Eagle Road. Currently, if you pull out there to go to Mountain View Elementary to drop off your students right now about that time, or anywhere between about 3:30 to 5 o'clock, it's a very hard time to get in there. Excuse me, Mountain View High School. I was just corrected. It's very hard to pull out onto that road, and having another light backing up traffic right there is questionable at best on how we're going to get out there, and turning left could be dang near impossible. I noticed in the ACHD form study, it's actually talked about having a right-hand turn lane. Wasn't sure if that was definitive or if that is going to happen. That pulls into Wells. But yeah, that wasn't discussed as going to happen yet. The study's saying that's going to go to a 7-lane highway. It's so far out there. People have to live here for that current period of time until Overland's widened to seven lanes, which is, almost unheard of. We barely got Eagle Road widened in the last few years. Come on, Overland getting to 7 lanes. I don't see it happening anytime soon, or creeping up on ACHD's definite list to happen. Those are kind of my concerns at this moment. But I'd like to hear, again, a lot about the irrigation and the fencing that's going to go in there, and then what the traffic plan is to pull in there.
In my concerns to ACHD, they said they didn't know about the apartment complex.
Yeah, we did submit a form to our ACHD contact, I guess, for pulling onto Loader Place, because we have a lot of turnaround traffic right now trying to get to the freeway. And, their comment was that they didn't even know about the apartment complex. It was probably just that individual, but I'm not sure, because they've obviously done a study. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. We'll have the applicant address those concerns for you, man. Any questions for the applicant or for Josh? Council? Okay, no. Thanks, Josh. Anyone else online that would like to testify? I don't see anyone. All right. Seeing none, turn the time back over to Deb.
Council President, members of the council, thank you. I'll take up the questions and comments in the order we heard them. For the first gentleman, concerned about the livability of Meridian, I guess I would offer some additional points for your consideration there, that you have a housing shortage and you need more housing here, and your comp plan calls for a variety of housing. And so I think this development really brings that forward, of bringing forward a variety of housing to meet all needs in your community. It is actually staying CG. I was concerned about, rezone away from CG, and multifamily is a conditional use within that zone. And as we talked about during the presentation, that residential, and particularly high-density residential, is greatly needed in your mixed-use regional designated areas, where you're along arterials, and at this interchange is really the ideal location to put density, where you do have the roadway network that is both existing and planned in the future to be widened to serve that density. And also it really helps to reduce trips. Commercial generates more trip generation than residential. So if this were to be developed with commercial uses, that would create more trips in the immediate area, causing him probably greater concern. And the residents here help take away some of those trips of people having to live further away and drive into the commercial when they live next door. So you're able to capture some of those trips that people that are able to work and eat and shop near their homes. That really takes cars off of the road. We are also located along a transit route with a nearby bus stop, and as Councilmember Hoagland noted, greater density will support greater bus activity and support for that. On Mr. Bongiorno's comments, we understand that additional road connectivity always helps additional fire access, and that road is ultimately planned there. Cinema Drive will be built there when it's needed and when that accompanying and underlying land is developed, as has always been contemplated in the 2016 development agreement and proposed with the phasing here. We are just 0.9 miles from Station 4, so we are well within the target range, and Overland does provide the best access to our apartments through both primary and secondary access opportunities there. On the questions from Josh about irrigation, the irrigation facility on our property will be piped, and so hopefully that will alleviate his concerns and answer his question about what will happen to that in the northeast corner of our property. The fence that was proposed to the neighbors and the developer solicited comments from them will be a wood-grained vinyl fence, a privacy fence. The signal should actually help. I think he raised concerns about getting out onto the road. Signals create gaps, and that actually benefits all of the neighboring driveways around the access point that actually has the signal. And so that should actually greatly increase the safety that they experience getting in and out of their driveway on the adjacent property. There will be a right turn lane onto Wells that was required by ACHD and will be constructed by the developer. And the Overland is programmed to be widened to 7 lanes, and understandably, that's not in the immediate future. That's a planned future improvement, but the trips for the apartments were studied with that phasing in mind and with that timeline in mind, and we still were within the levels of service. And ACHD has, in fact, approved that development and the phased plan. And finally, Councilmember Borton, in response to your comments about carports, I guess we would note that the development is still going to go through design review, and at that time, we're certainly open to trying our best to, in any language that you're comfortable with. I mean, the best that we can, I think, propose is that we'll work through design review to ensure that our carports are have compatible architectural design with both your guidelines and the development that we're bringing forward. So we're happy to try to mirror that, even though we don't know exactly what they would look like at that time. But open to further discussion on that point. And any further questions you may have for us.
Mr. Kavanagh.
Deb, should you receive approval tonight, what's the timeline? It is, Dean, I'm sorry, but I'm probably sitting too far back. What's your proposed timeline, should you receive approval tonight, from now until you would welcome your first tenant? I live in South Meridian, and I'm well aware we've got some real significant traffic challenges over there. Some of that's being mitigated through ACHD, but I'm trying to get a sense about when your project would come online.
Mr. Kavanagh, the idea is we actually are kicking off our architecture team tomorrow upon approvals tonight. It takes about 4 to 6 months to run through drawings, put them in for permits, get our contractor on board to prepare them. The goal on the early side is to start in Q4, end of this year, but most likely, just how things go, we'll be starting in Q1 with our first units turning around month 13 or 14 once we break ground, and then delivering the plan is to deliver them per building for the next, I believe, 8 months.
Mr. President.
Mr. Kavanagh, I guess 2024.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was a political science major, not a math major.
Oh,
So
sorry.
trying to,
It's about 22 to 24 month total construction timeline, with the first units kind of coming on around month 14.
thanks.
I was a communications major. We don't do very good math either. Any other questions for the applicant?
That is barring that we can find lumber.
No kidding. That's true.
Mr. President,
Mr. Borton?
just in fairness, the one issue which is still unresolved is the phase 1, phase 2 of the Cinema Drive, and the staff report and planning's analysis, and then Deputy Chief Bongiorno's remarks are pretty compelling. I assume if Winco doesn't get built, for example, phase 2 never goes, you never know what happens, right? Then it wouldn't get built. So there's a variety of concerns that seem to tip towards still requiring that access to be connected as part of phase 1, Cinema Drive, as staff and our fire department has recommended. So before we break, I guess, is there any last comments or considerations? It just seems like the evidence tilts towards requiring that in the first phase. Just wanted to give you a chance to comment before we start. Thank you.
Councilmember Borton, thank you for that question. Yeah, I think it's important to understand your comment was, well, what if it doesn't get built and it's needed? It's actually needed just for the serving the commercial uses that would cause it and appropriately have it be built. And so it isn't needed to serve the uses on the west right now. They exist now. It's not needed to serve our apartments in phase 1. That's been demonstrated with our traffic impact study and with ACHD's approval. Staff expressed the concern to us when we were talking about this that it's a planning preference to have that additional avenue for connectivity, and in particular for pedestrians, which we pointed out have the sidewalk along Overland. So what it's really needed to serve is the commercial uses. When that Winco goes in and when the retail pads develop out front along Overland, you need that access, and that's why it's appropriately designed and built when that phase develops. And that's not going to be farmland in your city for very long. I mean, the reality is that it is going to be built, but it's going to be built when it's needed and when it can be designed. And so if it's built before then, just in anticipation of those uses, it may not be in the place that accommodates the best use of that land and the design of the commercial pads. So I hope that addresses your particular point there where you're trying to figure out when is it needed. It's not needed yet. And just as if we didn't have to come forward with the preliminary plat now, that was a later application that was determined to be necessary. That would not be a discussion at all. You wouldn't have a reopening for that. It's an off-site improvement to the apartments. It's not needed to serve the improvements. We don't actually control the land. And so it's just a function of that preliminary plat to separate out these lots. It's always been planned with the Winco, and it will get built with the Winco. So we're not changing anything. We're not changing anything in the need for it either.
Mr. President?
Mr. Borton?
Is there information from the Winco development team on when they anticipate moving on that parcel, both the north and the south?
Council President, Councilmember Borton, no, not immediately, although now with the preliminary plat, they're subject to your code requirements for moving forward with plat timing.
Okay.
Do you have anything to add on that?
Other than it's hard for me to build a road on someone else's property. It's Winco's property, and then if we build a road on it, that's, in my mind, a little intrusive. Plus, I know that they rely on that agricultural use for that land, and putting that road would cease that activity, unfortunately.
Mr. President?
Mr. Borton?
I guess the last comment on that, I mean, it's beyond a little hard. It's impossible, is it not?
Oh, for the
Yeah, how would you satisfy a condition to do that if you don't control the property?
Mr. President.
Am I missing? Yeah.
Mr. President, members of council, Councilmember Borton. From what I heard, previous testimony by Ms. Nelson was that WinCo is not supportive of that. So this is a modification of an existing development agreement that they are a signator of, which means they'll have to sign the modification as well. If they're not in favor of it, they won't sign it, therefore the DA won't get modified, and therefore the project will go away. So you're correct. They don't have the legal ability to build it on somebody else's property. It's an off-site improvement that I've heard Ms. Nelson say more than once, and I know what she means. It's an off-site improvement that doesn't serve their development. So yes, they can't build it without WinCo's support, and WinCo, as they said, hasn't decided what the configuration of that property is going to be yet.
Mr. President.
I feel like I buried the lead on that a little bit, so that's very on, I guess, the end of that discussion from my point of view. So, thank you.
Mr. Hoagland?
Mr. President, and I wanted to ask staff to weigh in since Sonia's been way too quiet over there tonight.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, the property is all currently owned by WinCo. The sale or transfer of the property won't go through until this conditional use permit is approved, from what I understand.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hoagland?
follow up with Sonia then. Is there a need for the alignment? As we were having that discussion earlier, I was thinking, boy, maybe that should be offset. Does that create an issue? And those types of things. Because I was thinking earlier, well, there has to be alignment and that sort of thing. Now I'm not so sure. Has staff kind of wade through that and kicked that around?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the council, I don't know that there's a whole lot of wiggle room in the location of the extension of Cinema. That it does exist at the west boundary. It's actually 50 feet off the west boundary. There was, for some reason, a gap left there, but ACHD is requiring the completion of that when it is extended.
Thank you, Sonia.
And their approved concept plan does show the location of the road, which is pretty much straight across to Wells.
Mr. President,
Ms. Strader?
curious if the property owner or WinCo is here and would like to offer up any comments. I mean, I could see the argument striking both ways, right? Maybe this would be more appropriate to come together so we'd have that visibility on future traffic and this connection that staff says is needed. So it's a beautiful project. I'd hate to see it die because of this reason, but I'd hope that WinCo had enough certainty in their plans that they could give some insight right now.
Council President, may I respond to that? To Councilmember Strader, no, they're not present, but they did provide the letter to try to state their concerns with it and their timing, and it is that, and they state right in the letter that they have no objection to building the road. They understand it is going to be done when their development is done. They're just asking for accommodation on the timing. They don't want the road to be built across their property before they know exactly where it will be. And both endpoints are known, but there's, design within that of exactly where which uses will be along the frontage to know where it divides the parking areas, et cetera. And so they want some time to do that with their final design plans. So it's not an objection to the road. It is just a timing issue that they did not support it being built in phase one. They do want to continue to farm the property and to locate that road with their final design plans.
Mr. President.
Ms. Strader?
Yeah, I understand, but WinCo has an economic interest in selling this piece of that parcel. And so I guess I'd say this is in their best interest too. I'm just surprised. It doesn't sound to me like there was a whole lot of wiggle room on where that road would go. So I'm just trying to understand that. I guess if that's the feedback, thanks.
Mr. President.
Mr. Hoagland?
Yeah, and this might be for Sonia, I'm not sure. WinCo had submitted a letter that's part of the record. And, they talk about advancing Cinema Drive extension to phase one's not necessary to serve phase one. And it says, until those plans are finalized with the development of phase two, the extra placement of Cinema Drive is unknown. And they said, they have to wait to find out what the commercial parcel for the fronting on Long Overland Road will be. So I'm thinking it sounds like it already is in place. We know where it's going to be. It's just not it's a timing issue of when to do it. Am I reading that correctly, that it's a timing issue?
Members of the council, Councilman Hoagland, in my mind, there's not a lot of wiggle room in the placement. I believe Mr. Goins from Winco is here tonight, if you would like to get his testimony on the matter.
Would love to.
No? I thought I saw him, excuse me.
Mr. President, yeah, if Mr. Goins is here, I'd like to hear their thoughts on it. If not,
Is he here?
not here. Okay. Yeah, and one of the things, reason I asked my question early on about the signal at Wells is if that was not going to be signalized right away, then I would think definitely you have to have that cinema extension to get out to a light to be able to exit. But that answered that question for me. If it's before occupancy, the signal's operational, and people move in and they have a way to leave, exit with a light, that definitely makes it, in my mind, less necessary. But so,
Mr. President,
Ms. Strader?
question for staff on that, and I really appreciate Councilman Hoagland sussing that out. Are we covered on that? Do we need that as an additional condition, or is that going to already happen? If they could give their opinion about that timing.
Council President, Councilwoman Strader, I'm not sure if I understood your question right. It's currently a condition of approval in the staff report that the extension of cinema occur with the first phase of development instead of the second phase as proposed. The main reasons for that, again, are disbursement of traffic. You know, you've got a lot of units there that are going out one way in and one way out. So that would help to disperse traffic. Another reason is for the residents to be able to more directly access the commercial uses further to the west, the restaurants, the retail uses, the animal care facilities, without going out onto the arterial street and then having to go back in again. That's the main reason that we require cross-access in commercial developments and interconnectivity.
Mr. President, understood. I just meant the construction of the light. Are we comfortable that that is going to happen at the appropriate time?
Yes.
Under the current DA?
Yes, Councilwoman Strader, it is a requirement in the development agreement that it occur prior to issuance of the first certificate of occupancy within the development.
Must have missed that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One last question. What is phase one going to look like? I'm sure that you had a phasing plan on here that I don't remember. How many buildings are involved with phase one?
Council President, all of the buildings are in phase one in the apartments.
Okay.
The apartments is phase one of the Plat, and then the apartments are not individually phased.
Gotcha. What's the pleasure of the council? No additional questions? Then, if that's the case, then we can have further discussion before we close the public hearing, or we can, I'm looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. President, it'd probably be wise to have a discussion. There might be something that pops up that we need some further clarification on, just in case. So I wouldn't mind having the discussion before we close the public hearing.
So noted.
Mr. President,
Mr. Kavanagh.
we did hear some testimony. I think the gentleman's name was Josh, who had some concerns about water access, questions about water access before the council is not something that's new to us. The applicant did, I think, a satisfactory job of explaining from their perspective, but I was hoping at least Mr. Neri could give a quick, brief synopsis about Idaho Water Law and at least address some of the gentleman's concerns.
Sure, Mr. President, members of the council, Councilmember Cavanagh. Idaho Code is very, very clear on this subject matter. So where the delivery of water occurs has to remain. They are going to have to make sure that the water does flow through to the existing users of that irrigation water. So that's a concern that's expressed fairly often by folks. And again, the law is very clear on this subject matter. I'm sure Ms. Nelson and her clients are aware of that as well. They will have to maintain it. And she is correct that from a user standpoint, having a piped system will help be more efficient. But they do have to maintain it by law.
Thank you.
Mr. Hoagland?
Mr. President, thank you. Just for discussion purposes, you know, as I said earlier, that light to me was one of the key features of this development, and would that extension be needed now or later? Getting out and in from, you know, Overland Road is you know, going to need that light, and to me, we do want cross access. But at the same time, you have a vacant lot, and that actually is farmable land, and we know it's going to go away someday, and maybe it's going to be the last parcel of farmable land in Meridian. Who knows? But it's something that I'm comfortable with the project moving forward with that light at Wells without the cinema extension. It's a quality development. I like a lot of things about it. And like you, Mr. President, contemporary our farmhouse sits better with me than modern craftsman. So just one of those, you know, personal perspectives. And to Councilman Borton's remarks about the, not the garages, the carports, absolutely correct. Yeah, how those look, does it fit the development? Is it a quality look to it? Doesn't necessarily have to be expensive, it just has to look quality and function well, and keep that a nice looking development. So there's a lot of things to like about it. And I think Ms. Nelson talked about the fact that commercial, if it was a commercial development, we know the Winco project's going to add a lot of cars to that. And residential, you have more peak periods, there's traffic, but it is less than a commercial throughout the day. So I'm comfortable with a lot of the things that are proposed about this, and having it move forward. And it's in an area where we're not talking about the fringe of Meridian. We're not pushing out development. We're not at the far edges where there's creating more traffic out here. And I think Todd rightly brings up the point, there's lots of traffic, and there's situations where what can we do to alleviate? And in the perfect world, we would have done everything from the center moving out. We're very mindful of leapfrog development, but at the same time, we've grown so rapidly. There's been a lot of development, and I've supported quite a bit of that, you know, as it moves out our boundaries. But where we have one that's already on a major arterial, ready to go, that can provide housing and potential for transportation, mass transportation, and those types of things. You know, I'm open to council's consideration. There might be something that might change my mind, but I'm comfortable with it.
Mr. President,
Ms. Strader?
I share a lot of Councilman Hoagland's comments, and I'm sympathetic with the traffic challenges that we're having. I don't think we want this to turn into Portland. I also don't want it to turn into Houston, so I don't think we want to put apartments everywhere, but I do think we want to put them next to transportation corridors. So this checks that box for me. And the philosophy, I think, behind that would be people can live and work and recreate in a place, will avoid trips all the way across town. And so, if we don't have a ton of apartments here in this CG area. So I do buy into the idea that this will reduce trips compared to alternative housing types and having people drive across town. It's hard catching up. It's hard with ACHD constantly catching up to us, and we're trying really hard to be really proactive as much as we can as a city to help with that. I like the apartment product itself. I like the aesthetics, and I like the amount of open space, which is quite a bit compared to what we sometimes see, and I like the amount of amenities. I don't buy into the idea that 36 students will be produced by this apartment complex, but I'll take that up at another time with our counterparts at West Ada and ask them about that. So I'm in favor of this one.
Mr. President,
Mr. Borton?
there's not much more to add. I agree with my fellow council members and their reasoning and logic, and quite frankly, I think the conditional use multifamily in the CG zone is difficult to do, and this design and style raises the bar, quite frankly. Really, really attractive and well done, and if we see future ones, this might have an impact on the next and the next, because there's a lot of good that comes with this one, and the reasoning behind it being appropriate here has been described, and it's spot on. So I too am supportive of it.
Mr. President.
Mr. Cavanagh? So you.
Thank you, sir. I always hate losing good commercial ground. And that's where I kind of started from this particular project is, boy, if we're going to lose a good piece of commercial space in South Meridian, which we need more commercial in South Meridian, project that really, really be elevated. And this one does. It elevates. We were talking earlier about the Fields District, and something like this out, future to think in the Northwest Meridian could kind of be a cool addition to with the design, with kind of what we've talked about conceptually out there. It's kind of interesting. It's different. The piece I kept coming back to time and time again is it creates community for people of all ages. I'm, for the most part, supportive of it. I am wrestling a little bit with the phasing and wells. I'm not sure that I'm satisfied for striking that condition from the staff report. I wish a representative of WNCO could be here to help kind of paint some of that picture, give us a little flavor. And then, just a thought potentially is to include within the DA is something to Councilmember Borton's point about design or materials to create carports that are similar in nature to the architectural styles of the building, something like that. Recognizing that the applicant will work with staff through that, but to at least have that on the record that this is kind of the direction council is wanting to go to help support our staff. I'm not sure I could be supportive if we're striking that access piece, in part because we're going to have scenarios where people who live within that neighborhood wanting to access some of the commercial space that already exists, commercial retailers, and until they have that access, then they're going to go on Overland and double back around. So I don't know what council's thoughts are on that. I'm supportive of the staff report.
I have a question for Deputy Chief. Is he still available? I think he is. There he is. There he is, Mr. Bongiorno. So explain to me what your thought process is with Cinema Drive. Does it have to do more with access? Does it have to do more with connectivity? Is there any safety issues that we need to be aware of?
So, Mr. President and Council, for me, it's just giving me that secondary access. We have, by code, we have access into the complex. There is an emergency access on the far corner only, but like I said, as Overland is getting busier and busier, like I said, Mr. Everly kind of hit it right on the head. If for some reason that intersection is packed full of cars, it gives us the opportunity to go down through Cinema, down near where Rudy's Pub is, or something like. We're going to head to the Harley dealer, and then head west and cut across that way to get to this project, because Deb mentioned Station 4, but Station 4 unfortunately has a very low reliability rating. So that's something that we're working on also. So with the low reliability rating, there is a good chance that either Station 6 or Station 1 would be covering this apartment complex. So for me, it's just giving me an additional avenue to get into this complex. And then once the full build out happens, we'll actually have a third all the way up near the interstate, which will make it even better still. So it's just, it's quick access to the complex for me is all I'm looking for.
Thanks, Deputy Chief.
President.
Mr. Kavanagh.
Thanks, Councilman. And I guess maybe just to add a little piece to that, I think that Winco project came on or annexed in early on, maybe in my first term. And so I guess if I felt like I had good confidence that that was going to be happening sometime soon, I'd feel better about it. But we've seen that sign, Winco coming soon, come up and go down a couple times. And so I'm nervous about the when and the if behind that. And unless I had some better confidence about what that plan would be, it's hard for me to be on board to strike that condition.
Mr. President.
Mr. Neri.
So I just have a concern, and I'm not totally sure from Deputy Chief Bongiorno's comments. The current plan that they're proposed meets the code, if I understand the staff report. So having it be better is great, but requiring it to be better is a little bit more of a concern as this, because this is an entitled property. This is not an annexation. This is a conditional use. So yes, you can condition those things, but as we've stated, this property is an off-site improvement on somebody else's property that doesn't agree with it. So it means they won't sign the development agreement, so it won't get built. If that's the council's comfort level, that's perfectly fine. But again, if it meets the code on emergency access, it's difficult to make a case that we can require more just because we'd like more. We'd always like more, but we have to be mindful of what the code requires. And if you recall a little bit, and I'm not here to speak on behalf of Winco, but that original project that was going to go forward was planned to go before the Linder Village, and Linder Village got remanded, and that got delayed, and then the Linder Village is now under construction and is planned to be open here within the next 3 to 6 months. So I don't know what their timing is, but I know that's what happened to their timing is because of that. But yeah, I have no other idea of when their plans are for that parcel. So.
Mr. Neri. So to confirm, you have legal concerns in regard to not striking the Cinema Drive aspect of this project?
I do. I do for 2 reasons. One was that if our only basis from the fire department is it would be nice to have another access, that's not a very strong basis. Secondarily, it's not their property, and they have no control over it, and the property owner, at least to what we know as of this moment, is not in favor of it. Therefore, it won't happen. So they won't get them to build it, so then the project won't get built. And again, if that's the council's comfort, that's certainly fine.
Mr. President.
Mr. Bongiorno.
Mr. President and council, and thank you. I like being kept on my toes. So I did pull up my code book while you were talking, and any apartment complex that has fire sprinklers in it, if there's 200 or more units, requires a secondary access.
So, Mr. President.
So it is in the code book.
Mr. President, I want to ask Mr. Bongiorno a question, because what I heard, and that's what I was trying to parse out as well when I was listening, was the fact that if we have wells, did I hear you say there already is emergency access besides?
There is, I'm sorry, Mr. President and Councilman Hoagland, one of the original plans I saw, I'd have to ask Sonia if it's still there. On the far west corner of the property, there was an emergency access. I'll defer to Sonia to see if it's still there. I haven't seen it in any of the plans I've seen up on the screen, but it may or may not be there.
Mr. President, Yeah, there is one on the east end of that site, the multifamily project, but does that meet your half the distance diagonal thing?
Yeah, that's what I was just trying to
Real
look.
technical of me, sorry, but
Oh, no, you're
just
good.
trying to
Yeah.
remind you of that requirement.
Yep. And I'm trying to find my report.
Half-distance diagonal thing.
Yeah.
Technical
So
term.
another code section, Mr. President and Council, it says that if there's two accesses to the same property, they have to be at least one half the diagonal of the property apart. And
What does that mean in council terms?
that's what I'm trying to find out in council terms, if it meets it or not. I apologize for the delay here.
And Mr. President, I would like to hear from the applicant if that's a question they can respond to.
Sure. So let's wait for Mr. Bongiorno. I'm interested to see this tug of war of the staff and
Nothing like being put on the spot. Sonia, is that in the 2021 applications or 2020?
2021 is what the conditional use permit is under. It's under Seasons at Meridian.
Okay, thank you. There it is. I found it.
tell you what, how about we take a 5-minute break and let staff figure out what we're talking about here, and we'll regroup in 5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you,
Yep.
Mr. President. There we go.
Yeah, all day.
Very wise.
It's not just the morning that I'm gonna cut out and watch the game. Right?
All right. Okay. So we're back, whether you like it or not. Here we are. Any thoughts on what that access looks like and what that road looks like?
Mr. President and Council, doing my quick unofficial throwing the ruler on the monitor thing, they do meet the half the diagonal rule, so we're okay there. Again, I know one of the things that, and again, I'm not trying to justify anything, I'm just telling you the facts of the matter. One of the things that Mr. Parsons and I have been working on with all of these developers is trying to get different accesses off the same, that aren't on the same road. So in this case, both accesses will be coming off of Overland. If Overland's backed up, then we have no other access to the property. So the goal of having that other access now allows us to where we can at least go down to Millennium, curve in and get in that way if we had to. So again, it's another, I call it a real access. Yes, emergency accesses can be utilized, but they take time. And again, we're looking for that straight shot incident that we can get in there. So that's why I popped in earlier and said that I supported that request, because it will help the fire department with our response times into this project.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Before we have the applicant come back and speak, I know that I see that there's a hand up in the attendees, Mr. Mark Bertdorf. You see that, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, would you like to, you have had the applicant close.
Right, we can,
Okay.
I think it'd be wise to have him, if he wants to say something, have him be able to do so.
Okay. He should be rejoining the meeting momentarily with access to his microphone.
Mark, when you have access, can you hear us?
I believe so.
Okay, if you can state your name and address for the record, you have 3 minutes.
My name is Mark Birchdorf. My address is 1476 Loader Place, located just to the east of the development. You guys have been talking about an emergency access road on the east side of the apartment complex. Where exactly would that be accessed from Overland? Because all the east side property is residential currently. Also, I think a contributing factor would be the amount of distance between Overland with the length of Wells Avenue to just be going into the apartment complex, with the amount of vehicles that are going to be in that apartment complex, leaving morning, mid-afternoon, whatever, with the limited amount of length there to get into the apartment complex would create quite the congestion and traffic. So I think having that extension prior to people moving in there, giving them another entrance and exit, as well as another entrance and exit if there is an emergency, or I would at least like to see where the access point is to the emergency exit on the east side of the development, if at all possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, we'll answer that question. We have the same question too. All right, so looking at this diagram, this picture of, it's on the screen, where exactly is that emergency access at?
Mr. President, Sonia, are you controlling the mouse there where that right-hand image and you got the cursor down at the lower right side?
Yeah, it's that lower right corner where Councilman Hoagland mentioned of the right photo. Either one of them.
Since we gave someone from the audience a chance to speak, I'll let the applicant have the last word.
Council President, members of the council, thank you. Just a couple of quick facts that I think are appropriate to respond to the new commenter and also Mr. Bongiorno. That, as you just noted, the emergency access is in that far southeast corner along Overland. I think it's also important to understand the dynamics of where station number 4, our closest fire station, is. It is east of the site, just down Eagle Road. And so fire trucks traveling from station number 4 will go north on Eagle, turn left onto Overland. The closest access to the apartments will be this emergency access. And so they, to go further to the signal is not necessary. To go even further out to the a connection to Cinema Drive to take you further around is also not necessary. Right. Now it doesn't mean we don't appreciate Mr. Bongiorno's comments that you could be served from multiple fire stations and that more connectivity into any site provides great access. I think it's also important to point out the distance between our signal and where you could connect to Cinema Drive. We're talking about 0.2 miles. So the additional space that we're gaining for a road connectivity, additional access point is very limited. And primarily the access is going to be coming from that Station 4.
I think what Mr. Bongiorno was trying, I totally agree with you, Deb. I think what Mr. Bongiorno was trying to say is that station number 4 has a reliability rate that's lower because of other reasons, extenuating reasons. And so I think he was saying that the likelihood of station 4 coming to this project would be lower as opposed to 6 or 1. And, so.
Council President, I understand it. It does have a reliability of 78%, which is nearly to your 80%, and it sounds like they're working on that there. It would still be the first designated spot for response. It just may not be available if they're out on other calls. And but they do have those 2 points. The location of the access was actually moved in our early discussions with fire for their desired location of this. And so appreciate Mr. Bongiorno's comments about meeting the access spacing. That was his desire.
Okay. Thanks, Deb. Any questions for Deb?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I do have a question for Mr. Neri.
Okay.
I understand, Bill, that we will be acting on each of these individually, these applications individually. But I was kind of curious about, for the carports, putting some language in there that it's part of the design review process or represent the style of the development, whatever we come up with. That I would believe would be under the DA agreement, the first one. Is that correct, to put that, as well as the removal of item number 3C? Is that under the first 0118, or would that be part of the second, or do we have to do it for both?
Mr. President, maybe if I could ask Sonia, the 3C provision is in the CUP or in the DA modification? Because I don't have it up in front of me.
Sorry, Dean. 3C is a preliminary plat condition. The
Carports?
carports could be under the new development agreement.
Or it could be a condition under the CUP.
It could be either way, yes.
And I don't know if there are design review standards that already exist that would already answer that question, but I don't know that.
Yeah, if you have specific thoughts in mind, please state them in
Yeah.
motion so far as what you want the carports to look like, if they differ from design standards. That's typically not something we do, so give us direction if you want something different.
Mr. President, Mr. Board, I think the applicant's remarks captured it, that the design will integrate the colors and style of the buildings that are also part of the presentation. And so they'll be compliant with the design guidelines, but also with an emphasis to match the style and color and texture and
I missed those elevations, so I wasn't sure if they had a different roof form or materials than the normal carports,
It
or.
wasn't an elevation specifically of the carport, but there was just reference to the commitment to not only meet the design guidelines, but to also ensure that their design matches and blends with the style of the structures themselves.
Okay.
It would represent the style, Mr. President, of the development.
That's
Not
specific.
ugly.
That's good. All right. Any other discussion before we close the public hearing? Hearing none, let's I welcome a motion.
Mr. President, I move we close the public hearing for H 2020-0118.
Second.
Do we have to close the public hearing for the other one as well?
And Mr. President, I move that we close the public hearing for H 2021-0007.
Second.
I have a motion to close the public hearings for item 2 and 3. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nay by the same sign? Motion passes.
So, Mr. President, Mr. Neri, I can move to approve both files at the same time.
As long as it's clear that one is the development agreement, whatever modifications you want in that, and it's clear what conditions, if any, you're going to place in the CUP.
Okay.
Mr. President, excuse me, if I could interject real quick, there was some significant testimony on the type of fencing that was offered by the applicant along the east boundary of the site, and that was in response to some of the neighbors' comments at the commission hearing, that be identified. The applicant offered us, I believe it was 6 foot tall, wood grain vinyl fence along the eastern boundary, so if the council agrees with that, please include that in your motion. Thank you.
And Mr. President, if I might ask Sonia, at which particular file do I include that under? Is that under the...
Conditional use permit, please, Seasons
Okay.
of Meridian.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hoagland.
after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file numbers H 2020-0118 and H 2021-007 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of May 4th, 2021, with the following modifications under file number H 2020-0118, that we would have that pass as is, and under file number H 2021-007, under the conditional use permit, that the fencing be as the applicant stated, the fence 6-foot wood grain vinyl, and under item B of that, the preliminary plat, that we remove item number 3C from the conditions.
Second agrees for discussion.
I have a motion to approve H-2020-0118 and H-2021-0007 with changes that were made in Councilman Hoagland's motion. Any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Borton?
I think the motion maker for the preliminary plat portion, I think the A3C condition doesn't get stricken, but instead of requiring the Cinema Drive connection to occur in phase 1, it would instead be required in phase 2. So there's still a condition, but the phase is 2 instead of 1.
And Mr. President, I would agree to add that to the motion. That makes sense, that it's part of phase 2 and not phase 1.
Does the second agree?
Mr. President, one other clarifying on the motion, the reference that we've had with regards to the carport and their design and the applicant's representations, that be integrated into the motion for approval of the CUP.
Motion maker agree?
Mr. President, I agree with that. We can add that language that carports should represent the style of development and be reviewed by staff as part of the design review process.
Does the second agree to that?
Yes.
My pleasure. Any discussion in regards to the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. President. Borton?
Aye.
Cavanagh?
Aye.
Strader?
Aye.
Hoagland?
Aye.
Burnt?
Aye. Motion passes. Next on the agenda is future meeting topics. None being said. Last item on the agenda is adjournment.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn.
Motion is that we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Liz. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
I was wondering when I was going to see you again.